So it's now been just over 2 months since Nuno Espírito Santo took the reins at Nottingham Forest. But are Forest any better under him, or would we have been better to stick with Steve Cooper? Welcome to your Forest News. Good morning, good evening, or good night. Hope you guys are doing well, and welcome to your Forest News. That's not really news, it's kind of a review, maybe would be a better choice of words. Coming up in today's video, we're going to talk you through Nuno. What has he done differently? Has it worked? And why has he kind of gone against the grain on certain things that a lot of people were expecting him to do? And how does it all compare to Steve Cooper? If you're enjoying the content, please don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to Forest Fan TV if you are new here. And don't forget, you've only got till tomorrow to get your tickets for this beautifully signed, framed Danilo shirt. Look at it, it's absolutely beautiful. Exactly like the one I've got here, but with Danilo 28 on there. Go to Football Prizes, get those tickets in before they run out. There's still a few left. And don't forget, there's an Insta prize. So if you pick out the right ticket number, you get to choose from Aurier's shirt, you get to choose from Worrell's shirt, Mangala, and of course, Steve Cooper's. And very quickly, we're giving away the City Ground from Foco. So all you have to do is go to the community tab, put in there, well, basically just read the note in there, how many pieces make up the beautiful City Ground. I'll show it to you guys in a second. Get your answers in there. We'll do the draw for that probably on Monday. So you got a couple of days to get that over the line. Okay, let's kick this one off and let's talk about Nuno, because Nuno has been here, as I mentioned in the intro, for about 2 months now. But how's it been? Is it been good enough? Are Forest seeing progress at all? Or is it more of the same? Now, what's interesting is a couple of things. Firstly, we did a pre-Nuno thing, what to expect from him, pre-report, call it what you want on that, and what was to be expected with Nuno coming in. And the first thing I want to talk about is formation. Now, under Wolves, at Wolves should I say, Nuno predominantly played in a 3-4-3 formation. Sometimes a 3-5-2, it depended on the players he had. We saw him at his previous club in Spain, he was doing a 4-2-3-1, and at his time in Saudi, he was a 4-2-3-1 as well. And when we were weighing it up, and I think potentially a lot of people thought he would come into Forest with a 3-4-3, it felt like the squad was into that shape, into that mold of that formation. However, off the bat, he kicks off with a 4-2-3-1. And the question is why? And I think the answer for me is, one, he thought that this would be the quickest way to change the style of football. And secondly, and probably most importantly, was the move of Morgan Gibbs-White from out wide in Cooper's initial, let's call it a 4-3-3 formation, to bring him back into the middle where he can be most effective. If you remember back to the video where we said MGW is going to be a headache for him unless he plays in a 4-2-3-1, I think this is one of the reasons why he did that. I'll leave a link for that old video. I'm sure I said other stuff that didn't come off. You can go check it out if you haven't seen it already after this video. So that's one thing. But what that allowed, and I think the key thing from this formation, was consistency and a quick development of a philosophy and a footballing style. Now, under Cooper, we would see a switch from a 5-back or a 3-back into a 4-3-3, sometimes a 4-2-3-1, loads of different changes and loads of chopping and changing with players in and out of the team. It was very hard to predict what setup, should I say, Cooper would go with. The style itself was quite consistent from Cooper. Now, under Nuno, I would probably say he still hasn't settled on his first 11. But that brings us on to our next point. Why has he not settled on a first 11? And the main thing being all the hiccups and bumps he's had along the way. Now, Cooper had that quite a bit with injuries, etc., with the players previously. But Nuno had AFCON to deal with as well. And AFCON took out 6 to 7 of our players who were at least squad players. And then, of course, Taiwo, who would have gone anyway, was out injured. But you had some big names in there. Aurier, Bolly, Einar. We had Kiate. Okay, maybe not a predominant name. Sangare, our marquee signing. And a couple of other players as well. And on top of that, we had a transfer window and keeper issues. So all of this was mixing into the pot. Now, Nuno started off really well, got very unlucky against Bournemouth with a dodgy ref call, and then went back-to-back wins against against Newcastle and Manchester United. And then the next thing happened that's made him struggle a little, I believe, and that was the PSR charges. And those PSR charges suddenly came at Forest like a dark cloud. Now, I was hoping Forest would have a reaction to it the same way Everton did when they got their points deducted, and you suddenly saw this togetherness and this force and this push that helped them get a couple of quick wins in succession and push them out from the relegation zone, which they've just about stayed out of now. We didn't really get that at Forest, and I don't think it's because Nuno wasn't able to drive it. I just think it was the lack of players or starting players that were missing from that team. So he's had a very, very interesting and definitely a start that most managers probably wouldn't have wanted under a new club. But I think he's come out of it quite decent. But the real question is, how does he stack up against Cooper? So let's have a look at a few stats. All right, so let's have a look at some stats. And before all the people who think I hate Cooper come out and say, oh, you're doing this bash Cooper, I'm not. I'm looking at this objectively and statistically with none of my biases, okay? And there are some stats that were put together on Sky Sports on Monday night. Now, my biases are obviously towards Nuno, but it doesn't matter. The stats are going to be the stats. And let's start with the most important stat, and that's going to be points per game. Now, what I will add to this is Nuno's sample size is a lot smaller. It's 8 games versus Cooper's 17. So that could play out to increase his stats or decrease his stats. Obviously, one win, loss or draw will have more of an impact and move the dial up. But let's just ignore that for now. But as long as you guys understand that that's part of it. And I want to start with the points. So on average, Nuno is getting 1.3 points per match versus Cooper's 0.8 points per game. Now, if we were to then project that over a 38, well, before we do that, currently Nuno sits at 10th in terms of points and Cooper sits at 17th. So you could argue if your ambitions were just to survive, both managers would survive, but Nuno would finish basically top half. Now, if you project that out into how it would play out over 38 games, the total points tally for Nuno would be 49.4. So basically 49 points. If you used Cooper's 0.8 average, that would give you a total of 30.4 points. That probably wouldn't play out across the season to give you survival. Last year, you would have been relegated with those points. So just from the points base alone, Nuno is tracking a lot better. I mean, even if we were to tag Cooper back in today and keep his points averages, for example, and he would work off the base of the few wins Nuno has had recently, Cooper would end up on 34 points. If Nuno carries on from where he is on a 1.3 points per game tally, then Forest will end up on 41 points. Now, with FFP coming in, PSR, whatever you want to call it, that could still be tight. Deduct 6 from that, and you're looking at 35 points. That would have kept you up last year. It should do this year. What do you guys think? Now, on Cooper's tally of the 34, if we tagged him back in, minus the 6, that would put us on 28. I don't think that would have been enough. So that's an interesting stat to start with. Now, I'm not going to go through all these stats. You guys can look at them at your leisure. Like I said, this was done on Monday Night Football from Sky. But there's some real key ones. And the biggest one that stands out is the goals. Goals per game, we are now averaging under Nuno 1.9 versus Cooper's 1 per game. That is a huge difference. We've nearly doubled the amount of goals we've scored. And that one needs to be paired up with XG against. Right now, Forest are averaging 1.2 goals against in the league, which is the third best ranking, versus Cooper's 1.5, which was the 11th best. So in terms of goals being conceded, and this is XG, not actual goals conceded, but opportunity-wise is that oppositions have created a decent chance from, that's improved as well. But to be honest, under Cooper, 11th wasn't bad either. So on that merit, they're both decent. But now if you look at the gap from the XG conceded between the goals scored, we are in a huge net positive under Nuno of 0.6. Whereas under Cooper, the 1.8, the 1 versus the 1.5 is not as good. We were conceding more, so it's a net negative of -5. So those are a couple of the interesting stats there. What do you guys think about that? All right, so let's talk about and move on. You guys can pause the video if you want to look more deeper at those stats, entirely up to yourself. But let's talk about specifically Nuno and the players that he is currently using. And has he improved them since the Cooper regime? And the honest answer is, in the majority, I would say yes, he has. But there are a couple of, but not everyone. I think there are a couple of key players that have moved on very quickly, leaps and bounds. Obviously, the biggest one is Morgan Gibbs-White. And I don't think that was in terms of Nuno getting more out of him on the training pitch or teaching him new tricks, etc. I think for me, that was a positional change to play him centrally, as we spoke about earlier. The key ones for me, the ones that have had the biggest impact, especially over the last few weeks, are Callum Hudson-Odoi and Tavares. Now, as you all know, I didn't want Tavares at Forest. I'm still not convinced of him, if I'm being honest with you guys. But I can see and I can relate to what Nuno's doing, and I can applaud it. And I think Callum Hudson-Odoi's improvement has a huge reliance on Tavares and the space and the opportunities he's creating him. We know Callum Hudson-Odoi is a confidence-based player. Those goals have definitely helped him. I didn't think at Bournemouth he had a great first half until he scored that goal. And you could lay that at him at a few other games. But now you're seeing partnerships develop. And that's what I'm coming to here. Individuals, yes, have been improved, but partnerships are starting to develop. You've seen Callum Hudson-Odoi and Tavares linking up really well. We saw Nico Williams playing brilliantly and linking up and overlapping with Elanga down the right-hand side. And we're seeing Dominguez and Danilo looking pretty decent in the middle as well. And of course, the Brazilian combination at the back of Murillo and Felipe. So partnerships are so important in football. But what we're also seeing is a better spread of play. Forest traditionally under Cooper were very heavily right-sided when it came to attacking. Get the ball into Jono, get him running into the space. When Jono went, Elanga came in. Let's get that ball in behind him. Sometimes Elanga would switch to the left, but the idea was still the same. Now what we're seeing at Forest under Nuno is more balance in terms of more different artillery that he can fire. You've got the left side and the right side. In terms of actual attacks being more balanced, in fact, probably swaying right now slightly towards the left-hand side. And that, I think, is a huge change and an extremely important change because it means Forest are less predictable. We can attack down the left, we can attack down the right, we can spice up the different ways we attack, and we're not just a one-trick pony anymore when it comes to Nuno. So plenty of improvements all around. Like, I could do a whole video and dissect actual stats and bring them up for you, graphs and everything like that. But I just want to get your guys' opinion. And the question I want to ask you guys is, are you happy with where we're going under Nuno? Do you think sticking with Cooper, we still would have been okay this season? Or was Nuno the right choice? Maybe Cooper had to go, but was Nuno the right choice for you guys? In my opinion, my personal opinion, just to share it with you, I'm more than happy with what Nuno's doing. As long as I can see an identity, a philosophy, and some progression on the football pitch, that's all I'm after for Forest. The rest of the pieces, the Europe, everything else, whatever you dream of, that will come in time. but you have to get your foundations right, and your foundations have to start with an ideology and a philosophy on the football pitch. And we are definitely seeing that, in my opinion, under Nuno. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Please take it the right way. Hit that like if you haven't already. Subscribe to Forest Fan TV if you are new. And we will see you on the next video. Come on, you Reds.